I want to welcome you to our final workshop for this Friday. This is Church and Social Impact that will be led by Dr. Lisa Tunstall. You've heard me share a lot about our SENT seminar as well as our SENT entrepreneurial cohort. But we also have one other way we work in the program area of social entrepreneurship. So SENT is open space now for education, information, inspiration. And of course, I've shared in other spaces that the cohort is a model for those who already have ideas and are looking to launch those ideas and want to spend a 12-month journey together in order to further build out a very formalized project. The final way that we work with social entrepreneurs are those who already have an established organization. So they've already went through the runway, they've taken off, and they're a young social enterprise and or nonprofit, 10 years or younger. We call these our incubate partners. So typically once a year, we have an incubate partner application process where we invite those who, again, are in a more established space, but they're still young and vulnerable and they want to strengthen their impact as well as further strengthen their organizational structure. And we walk alongside them for an extended amount of time, usually 4 years, where we're able to help strengthen their work. And Dr. Tunstall was one of our incubate partners, and she'll share more about her work, but we are happy to be able to integrate not only our SENT cohort member, which was earlier today, Dr. Norton, but also our incubate partners, and that's Dr. Tunstall. And we also have another incubate partner in the room, Dr. Anthony Everett. So we are grateful to be able to allow those who are leading social enterprises and are in partnership and collaboration with the NBA to be able to lead this conversation. So I'll now turn it over to Dr. Tunstall, who could share more about her and her work and invite us into her presentation.
Well, thank you, Reverend Darnell. Good to see all of you. Bring you greetings from Los Angeles, California.
I think you're on mute, maybe.
No.
We're not able to hear you. Strong. Y'all can hear? Okay, I just can't hear. So go ahead, you're good.
All righty then, because I was going to have some issues here looking at this. But I just wanted to bring you greetings from Los Angeles, California. It's so great to see you all here. And I know I am going to be very aware that I know that you've gotten a lot of information if you've been through any part of the SENT seminar. This is just a wealth, a treasure trove of information that you've been exposed to. So I just wanted to share, I was asked to share about our journey, the BMAR story with you and kind of give you an idea to see in action some of the concepts that were talked about, I am sure, during your time. Can you guys see this screen? I don't see those little prompts that they told me about. See, Darnell has changed this. Thank you, Pedro. Thank you. You all get a kick out of this. You know, I'm of the typewriter generation. So, you know, they had to really do me a tutorial with all of this. And so my daughter made me practice this several times. But this is part of church social impact. And the particular ministry we have is called Broken, Mended, and Restored. And BMAR is an organization that we started out, and we address a formerly forbidden topic in the church, and that's abuse. And in all of our different contexts, we invite people to come in and to process their abuse or whatever they're going through in their lives that has impacted them traumatically. So hopefully when you finish this workshop, you'll be able to glean some information or insights, or it'll inspire you to think about ways you can implement what it is that God is placing upon your heart to do. So I just want to share this BMAR journey. It all started with the book. And I began the DMIN program, and I started thinking as I was thinking to go log on here, you know, COVID last year was like one blank. It was like a dark space, 2020 was. So it's almost like things that happened beyond then as we try to reflect now, it's almost like, wait a minute, I'm losing track of these years. But I actually started this in 1999 when I started my doctoral dissertation. And from this, I wrote a book, and the book was actually published in 2002, Mending the Cloth. And this addressed, Mending the Cloth addressed clergy domestic abuse. It removed the veil of secrecy from the hidden sin of clergy abuse. And I entered, even in the book, I addressed refute theological justification for abuse. I dealt with issues like submission. And what is godly submission? What does submission mean? Because these are texts that are often used, have been used, still being used to abuse, to keep others in abusive relationships, and particularly women. And also there are questions at the end of the chapter to engage reflection upon interventional resources, the journeys, even a page in the back that gives resources, suggested resources for those who find themselves in abusive situations. And from the book, when I had the book released, people said, oh, well, you need to have some discussion groups. So we had discussion groups about the book, but we found that we were running out of time. I mean, it was just, people were just so full in wanting to share. They needed more time in order to kind of ponder this whole thing of abuse and even their involvement in it, so to speak. So we had a conference, and we started planning an annual conference, and we had one every year with the exception of 2 years, and then came COVID. And so at our conferences, we really would go away. We would try to go through different parts of Southern California. Broken, Mended, and Restored is actually, our team is an interdenominational team. We have Disciples of Christ, of course, but we also have some Church of God in Christ. We have Baptists, we have Nazarenes, we have independent churches. And we all came together within this Christian context. And the reason we chose this particular context to intersect with the church is, you really, in all of my years, and I've been in church since I was about 4 years old, I'd never heard that discussed ever in the church context about abuse, much less a sermon about abuse, relationship abuse, any type of criteria being set up or standard in the churches. And so we decided we're just going to break this thing down. And so we brought in different professionals, Christian professionals, marriage and family therapists, clinical psychologists, to talk about the different forms of abuse and to present them to the groups. And then we would have small group discussions. We had our leaders trained to facilitate small group discussions so that they could interact about the material that was provided for them. And then we had a worship component to let the healing begin. Some of the experiences that we had at this conference was when we would present, I remember we went to the mountains one year to Al Hattie, a campground. Another year we went by the water, we went to San Pedro. We tried to get in very calming environments, but that were remote enough that people did not have to engage in the hustle and bustle of the city. And one particular session, a couple of sessions we had in Al Hattie in the mountains, I saw a lady visually weeping. And I didn't know what happened. And we were going through the characteristics of abuse. And at the break, she said, I'm abused and I didn't know it until just now. Until I saw that list, I didn't realize I have been abused and I am abused. So we connected her with some resources, and we tried to have like a really healing and safe environment to talk about that thing. Another young lady came to me. They came to where my room, the cabin, and asked me, could they talk to me? So we went for a long walk. One young lady realized she had just confessed for the first time. Her best friend brought her to the conference, and her best friend had no idea as to what she was going to tell me. The young lady told me that she was angry that she was being dragged to this conference by her friend, but she did it as a favor for her friend. But in the presentation, she had to acknowledge that she had been molested as a child for 12 years. And that when they brought charges against her stepfather, she had to go through the whole trauma of testifying against him. and he went to jail. He was incarcerated. But when he was released, her mother let him back into the home. And so like, she's like at 30 some years old, she's still carrying this stuff, still very angry with her mother. And so we were able to get her connected with some therapy resources, as well as to affirm her courage in coming forth with this information that she had been hiding all of these years. And it occurs to us that even as we embark on this work, that people are going through abusive situations silently suffering. And for men, it's a double burden, because what man wants to say that he's being abused by a woman? And so the target groups for our conferences were men, women, and teens. We had breakout groups for men. And those groups that group was real popular. They would always go over time because of the elder who was leading it and who was a board member. And I get a little emotional talking about him because he just passed away a couple of months ago. So we are still grieving Elder Luther, but he led a dynamic group with the men. And the men felt for the first time in their lives, they were able to open up and share. And their groups always ran way, way beyond the designated time. But it just affirmed to us that this was and is such a needed topic to be addressed, because people are actually hurting in silence. We would have our worship experiences were designed in such a way, often when people, particularly we discovered in the church, are suffering abuse, the first place they go to is the church. And when they go to the church, often, in my research, I discovered that they were told to, everything's going to be all right. You just trust God, you pray, it's going to be great. And consequently, the people will walk away feeling disconnected from God and angry with God, and feeling spiritually fragmented and emotionally fragmented. So the worship services were designed for a healing environment, peaceful environment, but also for people to engage God in a context where they were being taken care of. So we discovered after the conferences, we need somewhere outside of the conferences to engage people. And one of the places is the Healing Path. And the Healing Path meets bi-weekly. It started out, we opened it to men, but I could tell you, we just started getting men this year post-COVID, and that is via Zoom. And it's a Christian book discussion group. We literally go through a book, take turns reading and reflecting upon the passages. Some of the books we've used, because BMAR addresses physical abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, and yes, of course, sexual assault. And so some of the books that we have read in the group are Changes That Heal by Henry Cloud, 5 Love Languages, Wounded by God's People by Anne Graham Lotz, Traveling Light, and When God Whispers Your Name by Max Lucado. And these books all affirm an individual's worth, and encourages people in their spiritual, physical, and wellness journeys. We all need a wellness journey. We also decided we're going to take church beyond the walls. We're going to take healing beyond the walls. Let's go to the people. So we had for a season an event called the Praise Cafe, and it was a Friday night Christian music and arts event where we had poetry, dance, singing, and comedy. We had comedy, and we used a space at a local cafe in South LA, and we met bi-monthly with that. So the season for the Praise Cafe passed, so we implemented the Awe event with the understanding that those who have experienced spiritual abuse particularly do not want to go in a traditional church building to worship. Stained glass windows are triggers, and all of the different accoutrements around the church are triggers. I will have to say that I kind of had a journey where I was not with the church for a couple of years, I had to leave my church because of a life change. And sometimes the Lord, and I never could figure out, God sometimes will have you live what the people, the people you're going to minister to live. I think it was one of the prophets that said, I sat where the people sat. And so therefore I understood, I got it, to see certain things were a trigger. And it really was difficult to overcome that. So what we designed was an amazing worship experience, and we held it in community venues. In the last 5 meetings we had before COVID, we had it at a fire station, a safe place. We had it at the community room at the fire station. And as a matter of fact, right outside the fire station, it said that it was a designated safe zone. So people who are experiencing domestic violence go to the fire station. We didn't know that before we connected with them. As I said before, we want to give people an opportunity to encounter God outside the church. So what we did, we would really stage the ambience during this event. In other words, we would have aromatherapy. We would have the senses. We had videos with soft music, with nature scenes. We had beautiful decorations on the table. We had pictures for people to color, to draw, to express themselves. We had food. We had them to eat throughout the event. And it was just a space and a place to take a deep breath and to release and to just really feel love in the room, to feel peace, and to really be able to just reconnect, like a self reconnection with that. We got a lot. We would average about 40 or 50 people at these events. At one point, we thought we were going to outgrow the room, but then COVID hit. But these events were very, very good. We would have word artists, spoken word artists come. We would have a guest speaker. We had one, and we would try to get people from different walks of life. We even had one young lady who had been a rape victim, and she came to share her journey. And she was impregnated as a result of the rape, and she wanted to share her story. And several people were helped by that, her sharing her journey. We have discovered, we tend to try to project perfection within the church context, the Christian context, and it often is prohibitive to people who are going through things and who aren't perfect and know they aren't perfect. It prohibits them from coming and saying, hey, I need help. And we try to stay very transparent in this, that look, we don't have it all together. We're just as you, we're on this healing journey, but let's take this journey together. Let's venture out together in this healing journey. We had youth seminars, and I just thought of something that I didn't mention to you earlier, but when I was talking about the book, I was inspired to write the book because I was married to a pastor at that time. And I had so many encounters with clergy wives telling me that they were experiencing abuse at home and they had nowhere to turn. And I kind of, played it off. But when I started hitting the 5th or 6th different clergy wife told me about her experience, I had to pull it. I just said, whoa, why am I hearing this stuff? And when it was brought to the attention of their pastor of their marriage, they did not receive any type of support or intervention because it was taboo. And then we discovered that even in the context of churches, when, let us say, clergy, pastors, and it could be male or female, are being inappropriate with other members and are being abusive, the victims are very hesitant to come forward and to say anything because they see the clergy person as God. That is the same as bringing an accusation against God. And I guess that's how we see playing out when you see it's another church where the priests, now you hear people 40, 50 years later coming forward and saying they were molested. And people say, oh, why did you wait until just now? that is part of the trauma of being assaulted, of being abused. And so we wanted to be preventative with BMAR. So we held some youth seminars because we felt that if young people can learn what a healthy relationship looks like, then that's half the battle, we believe, in helping them to establish healthy relationships, healthy boundaries. So we partnered. I'm in the Pacific Southwest region of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. And so we collaborated with our regional youth ministry to go up to our camp and have a couple of youth seminars with preteens and teenagers. And we had a clinical psychologist and a clergy, ordained clergy woman, and these were women, to conduct these seminars with these young people up at the camp. And they were very transparent with the young people. And they talked about therapy. They talked about boundaries. They talked about their history of inappropriate actions in a relationship. And they had listed the characteristics of an unhealthy relationship. And I found out after we left that one of the girls at the camp texted her boyfriend. She broke up with her boyfriend and showed the boyfriend the PowerPoint and said, "We do not have a healthy relationship. This is a toxic relationship. So we are breaking up." And I said, hey, if we say one person, I was glad they weren't married because that would have been a lawsuit, but she broke up with him. And I said, you know what? If we say one person, and I also learned that they interjected the behavior, how they spontaneously hug each other and get in each other's space. So they learned from our facilitators, may I hug you now? May I, sit next to you now? Because they were told that, a lot of times church is a context where inappropriate hugs sometimes can occur. And they were told that's okay. If it's okay for you to say, I'm not comfortable hugging, and extend a hand. Now, I'm looking at some clergy. They teach us that in our clergy boundaries classes, but we empowered those young people to be able to have some healthy relationships and to really think about what does relationship look like. We also had church leadership seminars that involved church leaders and clergy and lay leaders. And because it was a learning event, we were approved and have been approved by our committee on the ministry with our region to grant CEU, continuing education units, for these seminars. And so the seminars, the clergy seminars, are designed to train leaders to engage their faith communities in being responsive and responsible to relationship abuse issues. In other words, we encourage the leadership to learn about what is the dynamic, what are the characteristics not only of abuse, but then have an appropriate response. Don't just say a prayer and send them on home. And ask them, investigate that situation. And if it looks like long-term counseling is needed, make a referral to professional organization. And we gave them a list of the organizations to do this. The church should be a safe place for victims and a place of accountability for perpetrators. An ironic situation occurred with us this past year, that one of our team members, BMAR team members, experienced sexual assault in the church context. She was at a church event, it was after church, and she was inappropriately touched by one of the elders. Well, she didn't realize until a year later that she did realize it, but she was not able to talk about it until a year later. And when she contacted her pastor, he said, well, I'm going to investigate this. And he talked to the elder. And so the three of them met, and the pastor told her, well, I talked to the elder and he looked me in my eye and he said he didn't do it. Can you imagine how she felt? And I was stunned because I said, oh my gosh, I expect this to happen in the church context, but golly, on my own team. So I met with the clergy, with the pastor. I also connected her with a therapist that we have with BMAR, who's been working with us in our series that I'm going to share with you, our Overcoming series. And she was able, and she's on the path now to heal. She's left the church, but needless to say that there's a lot of work that has to be done for her to heal, the emotional healing, the spiritual devastation, because this was she held her pastor in high esteem and she held this elder in high esteem. So she's on the healing path. As a result, this past April, we implemented Overcoming series. And in April, which was National Sexual Assault Month, we had a seminar on that, on what to do if you're a victim, what to do if someone in your family is victimized by sexual assault. Well, what's a sexual assault? It doesn't have to just necessarily be an actual act of intercourse. It's inappropriate touch in any way. It's things that are said to you inappropriately, sexually suggestive, as my mother used to say, being a little bit too familiar with you. And so we learned about this in the context of an Overcoming series. So the COVID-19 adjustments, needless to say, as everyone else, we had to make serious adjustments for COVID. Right now, all of our ministry delivery systems are currently virtual. The plus side has been that this has allowed for more frequent convening and a broader, larger audience. As a result of us going virtually, we've had people to join us for our events from the East Coast, from Georgia, from Michigan, where we probably would not have had that opportunity before. We also had to substitute the conferences with bi-monthly Overcoming events. So those Overcoming events, and we started those last year. Actually, we started year before last. We did Overcoming Spiritual Trauma. And for that event, we had Dr. Frank Thomas, and we had our psychotherapist, LaShonda Coleman. We had Overcoming Emotional Trauma. And we had Dr. Sarita Lyons, who's a psychotherapist, a psychotherapist. We felt we wanted to expose people to the fact that it's okay to say, I've been traumatized, and what steps can I take to overcome this trauma? So with these COVID-19 adjustments, we have learned that there are different ways we can expand our ministries, the systems, and deliver our ministry services. We also are gearing up towards having groups, support groups, because we realize that one group that we're looking to implement, and we're going to start this in January, is a grief support group. Those who have lost loved ones to COVID, and those who have just lost friends and others to just natural events, because we found out it's tremendous emotional trauma. They experience this trauma, and then in relationships, the trauma is multiplied if they have not processed their life experience. We are a ministry that's really looking to, a nonprofit that's looking to really make a tremendous change in the lives of the people in the church context. We were so fortunate and so blessed that 3 years ago, I sat where you now sit, I think it was 3 years ago, to Ascent seminar. We came across, someone recommended that we check out the National Benevolent Association. You guys need to check this out. That's what we were told. I have been in Disciples of Christ for decades and had no idea that we had this wealth accessible to us. And as a result of going to the Sent seminar, we had been together for about 7 or 8 years, and going to the Sent seminar really pulled together for us. A board member came with me. It really pulled together for us the structure of what it is that we're called to do and what it is we want to do to make an impact in our community, and particularly our faith community, So having gone through SENT, and we were accepted as an Incubate partner, this has been tremendous for us. It's well beyond any type of monetary support. It supersedes that, because the resource support, we are plugged in with folk who know how. For example, I plugged into a psychologist, a therapist who works with the NBA. We've worked with the organizational specialist. Reverend Darnell was the one that brought to our attention that we are social entrepreneurs. He met with me one day. He said, "Did you know that you're a social entrepreneur?" I said, "Oh, what?" I had no idea. I hadn't heard of social entrepreneur. I heard about the business, but not social entrepreneurship. And we were able to kind of get a hold of our identity, a better grip of our identity as an outreach ministry, so to speak. Because, it's one thing, you can identify a problem, you can try to attempt to address the problem, but you don't have the tools or know how to utilize what tools you need, nor how to utilize the tools. We were in a position where we knew very little, and it was a lot we knew we didn't know. But how many of you understand that when you don't know a thing, you don't know what you don't know? And we were able to get in touch with that through NBA. We are just so grateful to Mark, to Rebecca, to Darnell, Ashley. They have such patience working with us, pulling things together, telling us how to do giving us some ideas about, these are some folk you might want to collaborate with. The big thing about collaborating with other organizations, right now, this past year, we are entering a partnership, or we're already in a collaborative relationship with the CDC at my church. I'm associate pastor at McCarty Memorial Christian Church, where Eddie Anderson is the senior pastor. And we have a CDC Partners for Growth, LA, and we are partnering to bring about, we're targeting to bring about some greater mental health services in our area, because we realize that folk are traumatized, and right now church is a whole different way. Oh my goodness, 2020, I keep talking about 2020, but it was the most traumatic ever I can recall. I mean, I went through civil rights as a child and everything, but that 2020 with this pandemic has been like something like we've never seen before. But it's also caused us to reimagine how we're going to fulfill our mission as a nonprofit. We work with pastors in their churches to help them get resources, to connect them with community resources. We found out that we had to pretty much plug in with the unsheltered issue. Los Angeles is a hotbed of unhoused people. We have just downtown Los Angeles alone, there are 50,000 unhoused people. And so we have been active in reaching out to them in terms of passing out hygiene kits and donating to the food programs. We also have been active in the group shelters, and really wanting, many of them wanting to have a presence, a God presence in the shelter. So we were the House of Hope. We have been in partnership or collaborative relationship with them. I want to just ask you a question, because one more thing, we have the power line, last but not least, the power line. Prayer has been essential to us at BMAR. So every Wednesday night, and we've been doing this for the past 11 years, we have a prayer call every Wednesday night, rain, shine, I don't care what the holiday is, if it's 3 of us on there, from 9 to 9:20 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time every Wednesday. And each session is led by a different lay or clergy person from different churches and different denominations. And so we have people sending us prayer requests for healing, for situations of emotional abuse, or just prayer requests. And we have had such positive feedback about that. People have been so grateful. Sometimes, especially people who are going through turmoil, just want to dial in and hear somebody pray. And if I can hear somebody praying for me, it's all the better. And so this has been, I would have to say, a cornerstone for us to have sustained as long as we have. And God bless the NBA. Once again, I cannot sing the praises of the NBA enough. I had a cohort partner who called me, and I bounced things off her. Nona Jacob, some of you all know Reverend Nora Jacob. She has been so helpful to me. Reverend Darnell has been so helpful. I just could go on and on, but let me tell you, if this is so needed. Church is never going to be the same as we knew it. And we're going to have to find different ways to be the hands and the feet of Christ in addressing these issues that nobody really wants to touch. Because can I tell you, I did not want to deal with domestic abuse, relationship abuse. I did not want to deal with that at all. But it kept coming up. It just kept coming up. So for reflection, my question to you is, what social health issue do you find yourself frequently addressing directly or indirectly? Is there a social or health issue that keeps coming across your path and it makes you just kind of, scratch your head or And if so, how is this issue impacting you and your personal community? Is it being addressed by the church? Reverend Darnell, I don't know if you're on here. I can't really see the chat yet.
Yes, I'm monitoring the chat for you.
What issue keeps coming across your pathway? The reason this is important for you to identify, because how you respond, and if there is an issue, and if the issue is impacting you and your personal community, this process can inform your charge or your calling to address this particular issue with church and society. Are there any questions? I know I've gone through a lot, but I want you to really think about that. God alone can make the broken pieces whole. And Psalm 147:3 tells us that God heals the brokenhearted and he bandages the wounds. He comforts the broken. He puts together those broken pieces to make that heart whole again. And it's because of that blessed hope that we at BMAR continue to do the work that we do. We continue to press forward and reimagine what we can do and make the adjustments and try to stay as flexible as we can as we move forward in this great work. So I just want to thank you for your attention. And are there any questions?
So are there no questions at this time? I want to lift up, if you didn't see already, the topics in response to your question that were lifted up. So developmental and intellectual differences, too many not welcome because they are different. Mental health issues of isolation, loneliness, or grief amid COVID, continuing and struggling with addiction. These are some of the themes that are in this room today.
So I omitted saying that for 30 years, I just retired 3 years ago. For over 30 some years, I worked at Los Angeles School District as a speech and language therapist. And so that's at the Department of Special Education. So I am very, very sensitive and in tune with developmental and intellectual differences, and especially in the context of ministry. and of dealing with people, because often that population is ostracized, is judged. It's like a throwaway gift of God. And I've seen people, some of the most talented people I've ever met would fall up under those different challenges. And so we try to be intentional to be sensitive to that. And one of our healing path, in my healing path group, our healing path group that we do, a couple of people struggle with dyslexia. So they have issues reading aloud, but they're very verbal, very articulate, very cogent in their responses. So everybody, we just don't have them taking turns to read, but we actually have them to speak when they want to, to give input. And oftentimes they give us insights that we never thought about. The issues with mental health issues of isolation, loneliness, grief, that's what the overcoming events addressed. I really hope I could give you the information. We're going to have one October, the last Saturday in October. But one thing LaShonda had us to do, she does give us very good activities to do. She had us to get a jar and to put on slips of paper those things that are on our hearts that are causing us the most pain, but we can't address it in the moment. You know how something will affect you and you'll just store it in the back of the closet of your mind and you'll move on. But at some point, that issue will pop up for you. And if a trigger occurs, that issue may pop up in a way that can be maybe inappropriate. So we try to do very practical things in addressing those mental health issues. And it seems like the longer we went through COVID, the more we found ourselves addressing trauma, because that topic received the greatest response, even from the men. The men express their unique trauma. There's a trauma that's common to us all, but then there's one that's just unique to us, how we function according to our gender identification. What are we going to do to address these things appropriately? Yes, we have a website. It's team. Yes, let me put it here. And when you go on the website and inquire, leave us your, and I'm going to also give you our email address where you can give us yours and we will email you when we're having events.
A quick question here.
Andrew?
When you did the events, the Amazing Worship Experience events, at some point did you went back to the church building or you left it there? Okay.
We stayed in that fire station because I had family and friends who would come to the all events and they wouldn't set foot in a church. And I mean, these same friends, they said, oh, we love the all events. When are you going to have another one? Because they felt more comfortable encountering God in that space. Yes, but we never went back to the church building. And even though now I have an office at my church, I have not really had, and we have a building separate from our sanctuary. I'm still trying to figure out if when we start our mental health groups, once everything, we return back, whether I'm going to have them at the church, because our church is a cathedral looking church. So even them having to walk past that building, they wouldn't go in the building, but just to go in our community room, I don't want that to be a trigger or be prohibitive to somebody coming to get help. So I'm really trying to process that and think about some alternative space where we can do that, because we certainly don't want to re-injure. And as a result of me being of BMAR, my senior pastor has embraced this thoroughly. And so we are intentionally constructing our church as a safe space and especially welcoming to those who have been broken. And I want to say the last people that have joined our church have come from experiences of brokenness, and several of them church hurt. In fact, our new director of music has been out of church for 10 years. And he said, based upon what he had experienced with Pastor Eddie and his interaction with me, he came back, he's active again. But we have to be intentional, and we want all the churches, all ministries understand you need to have a safe space for people to come. We're hosting a funeral tomorrow at our church because they came to us and asked us could they use their space because the pastor or the clergy person that passed away was homosexual. And churches said they just don't want that element in their churches. And Pastor Eddie said, of course you can come to our church. We have to be welcoming. And that's part of wholeness and healing. That's what we boast about as disciples, but that's what BMAR is all about. We just want to be welcoming to those who come and love on them and get them some help.
Well, if there are no more questions, you can, of course, visit BMAR's website and also visit our MBA website where you'll see a list of all of our current Incubate partners. And remember, Incubate partners are young organizations, we use the word organization and social enterprise interchangeably, but when we say the word social enterprise, we're invoking that our existence is because of a social issue. And we're seeking to respond to that social issue. And we are grateful for the ways in which BMAR is seeking to respond to the social issues and the stigma around abuse. So we continue to send forth prayers as they engage the work and expand their impact in their context. And now, as we heard, even beyond their context, thanks to the shift virtually to be able to connect with people beyond the LA area. So there are no more questions. We want to wish you all a good evening, and we will gather again tomorrow morning for our final day of the Sense Seminar, where we will be joined by, in the morning, Pastor Rudy Rasmus, who is a local pastor, Methodist pastor here in Houston, who is doing great work as a practitioner and clergy person around homelessness in the city of Houston. So thank you all for joining us, and thank you, Dr. Tunstall, for such a great presentation. It's always good to be able to share with you, whether virtually or in person.
Thank you so much. You all have a wonderful, wonderful weekend.